Welcome back, students. As we go through Gatsby, we'll be looking at Chapter 3 in this video. If you remember, Chapters 1 and 2 were really filled with a lot of exposition. We got to learn about the characters, introduced to significant themes that'll be kind of recurring throughout the book, as well as significant locations. And one thing that I want to point out as we read through Chapter 3 is always pay attention to why the author describes something a certain way. Why did he intentionally describe a character's facial features? Why is he describing color? For example, Fitzgerald makes sure to describe Myrtle's dress and the dress changes that she had. He also makes sure to note that the light that Gatsby saw across the bay was green. So colors, descriptions, imagery, all those, you should always be asking yourself, what is the significance? Why is the author mentioning this? Because the author is never just mentioning something without some intentionality behind it. So just a thought process as we read through Chapter 3. And though Chapters 1 and 2 were a lot more expositional in nature, or expository in nature, Chapter 3, we begin to see some more plot development. And even though it's still pretty mysterious, we're unsure where the story's going or why we're learning about certain things, there's at least some movement. So that's a little encouraging for us because first two chapters were just all descriptive in nature. So Chapter 3 starts with Gatsby's parties. And Nick notes that the whole summer, Gatsby was throwing these lavish parties throughout the entire summer, every weekend. And so I love this picture of what Gatsby's mansion might have looked like during the party. It's just lit up. There's people coming. There's loud music and just a raucous joy. And in the beginning of Chapter 3, in page 39, I love just the way Fitzgerald describes the parties. He says, "In his blue gardens, men and girls came and went like moths among the whisperings and the champagne and the stars." Just so well written. Just the way he evokes a certain emotion as he describes the parties. And it's very interesting because throughout the descriptors of the party, Fitzgerald constantly talks about how there were men and girls. And so kind of like this almost like a sleazy quality to these parties, and just like men taking advantage of the youthful girls and the innocence of the girls. And so there's a kind of like juxtaposition. So pay attention to that because he uses that phrase multiple times. And that's another thing too. If an author repeats himself or herself, I think that's always important to note of why is the author intentionally repeating this word or phrase. And so just look at how the party is described. "At high tide in the afternoon, I watched his guests diving from the tower of his raft or taking the sun on the hot sand of his beach, while his two motorboats slit the waters of the Sound, drawing aquaplanes over cataracts of foam. On weekends, his Rolls Royce became an omnibus bearing parties to and from the city between 9 in the morning and long past midnight. Jeez Louise, while his station wagon scampered like a brisk yellow bug to meet all trains." And just goes on and on. I mean, like, there's just paragraphs up until page 41 of just descriptions of how elaborate and elegant and wild these parties were. Laughter is easier minute by minute, spilled with prodigality, tipped out at a cheerful word. The groups changed more swiftly, swell with new arrivals, dissolve and form in the same breath. Already there are wanderers, confident girls, who weave here and there among the stouter and more stable, become for a sharp, joyous moment the center of a group, and then, excited with triumph, glide on through the sea change of faces and voices and color under the constantly changing light. And so this kind of harkens back to the theme of, even the last chapter, where there's just like people coming and going, and just like a sense of ephemerality or like temporalness for the people in these parties and just in each other's lives. It's just so superficial. And I think Fitzgerald's doing that to kind of set up this tone of like people during that time period were just wasteful, not only with their money, but with their relationships, their time. And there's just this feeling of everything is just this, a vapor, just misty, just here and gone in a moment. And what's interesting is Nick Carraway, as he continues his narration, he was one of the few that was actually invited to the party. So these parties are just drawing people. It's the talk of the town. As you read through the chapter, there are people who have, who are looking for people to take them. Wives are asking their husbands to bring them. So it's just this party that draws people in. But Nick was the only one invited. And even the way that Gatsby invited him was through this just lavish display. He brought a chauffeur in a uniform of robin's egg blue crossed my lawn early that Saturday morning with a surprisingly formal note from his employer. And the fact that a chauffeur in this sharp uniform, came to deliver this note just shows how lavish Gatsby is. And so Nick goes. He goes to the party, and he just experiences one of Gatsby's crazy parties that is just filled with music, alcohol, dancing, partying, and just people just letting loose, just being wild. And he meets Jordan, and they kind of are starting this like fling, just starting their relationship. But even their relationship, like if you read it, and towards the end of the chapter, Nick will kind of revisit this, but even their relationship is just superficial, shallow. It's just kind of meaningless. They're just kind of doing it because it's what they're supposed to do. There's no intentionality, no thought behind it. I don't even think Nick really likes her, but he's just doing it. And then we kind of get more into some more rumors of Gatsby and what he does. And on page 43, there's a girl named Lucille. We get to learn about Gatsby's character as well. On page 43, Lucille says that she tore her gown on a chair, and Gatsby had asked for her name and address, and then within a week sent her this beautiful dress that was $265, which in that time period was very, very expensive. And so we get the glimpse that he's this generous guy. And then on page 44, more rumors circulate that he was a German spy, that he had killed somebody, he was in the war, and just this like gossip culture. And I think it's important because we don't even know who the guy is, but there's this people making assumptions. And I think that kind of speaks back to the theme of like false appearances and people not really getting deep into knowing a person, but just, talking about a person as if they know. And so this kind of like also brings back that theme of like just superficiality and just meaninglessness, like vanity. And then we meet this owl-eyed, spectacled, middle-aged man who's just been drunk and just been at his parties, probably living at Gatsby's house, and he shows Nick and Jordan this room full of books. And what he notes is on page 45 is that they're real. The books are real. And he's amazed by them as if there should be a reason that they aren't real. And it's just such an interesting exchange that occurs between this owl-eyed spectacled man and Nick, of saying that it's these books are real. And I think what Fitzgerald is trying to show is that Gatsby is one of the more authentic characters, even though we know nothing about him. And as we learn more about him too, we're still questioning who he is. But I think what he wants the readers to feel is that there is some kind of genuine authenticity about Gatsby. And so, even though these rumors are swirling, Lucille's story about how he bought her a dress when she ripped it, the books, these are supposed to kind of be positive reinforcements for us. And then finally, as they're continuing through the party, Nick, he starts talking to somebody who was also in the war. On page 47, this man approaches Nick and says, "Your face is familiar. Weren't you in the 3rd Division during the war?" Nick says, "Why, yes, I was in the 9th Machine Gun Battalion. I was in the 7th Infantry until June 1918. I knew I'd seen you somewhere before." And he asks him, "Want to go with me, old sport, just near the shore along the Sound?" And I think that phrase, old sport, is going to become a significant phrase for this particular character. And they're just talking. They're kind of chit-chatting about nothing in particular. This character's asking Nick, are you enjoying the party? And Nick's like, I am, but I would love to meet the host. I haven't even met him yet. And then finally, on page 48, just this in kind of like anticlimactic, subdued way, Gatsby says, or the man says, "I'm Gatsby." And Nick's surprised. And the readers are surprised too. Just the introduction of the most important character of the story is just so nonchalant. It's just, there's no pomp, there's no pretension, there's no spectacle. We just are introduced to Gatsby. He just appears. And I think that's significant too, because that juxtaposes like even how we met Tom Buchanan or Daisy Buchanan or Jordan Baker. All these other characters were met in these kind of more extreme, extenuating almost circumstances. But with Gatsby, it's just this like, "Oh, I'm Gatsby." And Nick's just taken aback like, "Oh, I guess you are." And I love the way that he's then described, because after we're introduced and we're kind of like settled down from the shock of like, "Oh my gosh, we just met Gatsby." Nick describes him, says he smiled understandingly, much more than understandingly. It was one of those rare smiles with a quality of eternal reassurance in it that you might come across 4 or 5 times in life. And I want you to pay attention that this is almost in similar kind of words that he used to describe Daisy. There's this kind of like reassuredness in this quality when you meet these characters. And there's just this effusiveness almost that Nick uses to describe Gatsby. But it's also, there's some kind of mystery behind it too, because twice in this chapter, Gatsby gets called away and he's told by his butler that first Chicago's on the line and then Philadelphia's on the line. And there's this kind of like mystery behind who's calling Gatsby, and kind of gives us this inclination that there's something more to who Gatsby is and what's going on. And then we continue on the story. Gatsby calls Jordan Baker over and has like a little conversation with Jordan, and in the meanwhile, Nick is continuing to absorb the party and just it's almost like a dream. It's just like, I mean, he's probably buzzed, he drank, and just the people around him are just not significant. And I think it's important just to read and get the feel, the mood of what Fitzgerald's trying to describe. And then when Jordan comes back, she says, "Oh, like, I heard the most beautiful thing." And we'll learn what that is later on. But then, you know, we're unsure at this point. And the chapter ends with Nick, you know, finishing his party, and he's kind of reflecting. Um, he's trying to explain that, you know, this party wasn't typical of his time here. You know, there was like kind of a humdrum. There was a loneliness he describes. He he didn't even really like continue his relationship with Jordan. Kind of met her months later again, and kind of they rekindled something. But there's just, you know, he's just working. He's kind of just kind of going through the rat race of life, and kind of a juxtaposition. I think that the chapter ends with this juxtaposition of life at Gatsby's party versus the normal everyday life. And I think that reinforces why so many people wanted to go to Gatsby's parties, because there was so much liveliness to them, and people found meaning and joy and purpose in going to those parties. And I think Nick was also feeling some of that as well. And then it also ends with a juxtaposition of Jordan and Nick. And Jordan is kind of like this, you know, she's a successful pro golfer, but also a little bit deceitful and kind of sleazy. And Nick ends the entire chapter on page 59, says, "I am one of the few honest people that I've ever known," which is an interesting way to describe yourself. If you have to tell others that you're honest, it's kind of a little sus, right? But I think there's he says that not only to juxtapose Jordan and Nick, but to juxtapose Jordan and Gatsby. And that further, it's almost like a foil character. Jordan is a foil character to highlight the authenticity of Gatsby. And so there's still a lot of an aura of mystery. We're unsure where the story is going to continue, why Gatsby took special interest to invite Nick, and what the significance of these parties are. And so we'll continue that as we go along in the next few chapters. So please make sure you follow along, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and throw a like to support. All right, see you guys in the next video.